Welcome to the first video in a brand new tutorial series that's all about leveling up your face painting skills. Today we're starting strong with a stunning design I call the floral tag1, a unique combination of a butterfly and a tiger with a beautiful floral twist. You will learn multiple techniques in one session, and the best part of it, you can use them in all kinds of designs. I'm Tamar David, and I'll be sharing tips, tricks, and creative insights to help you push your art to the next level. Let's get started. So let's break it down. Starting with a size 6 angle brush, I'm creating a thin line from the temple area to the beginning of the eyebrow, using only the very tip of the brush. It's really helpful to memorize these points over time, but in the beginning, if you're struggling, feel free to draw them in. It takes very little time and it really helps with keeping the design proportional and symmetric. It's usually best to gradually narrow the shape inward. Even though it's possible to create different butterfly shapes, it's important to try and keep both sides symmetrical. If you're finding it tricky, we'll start with this version, a neatly folded inward butterfly, and later on, we'll explore more options. When I paint the butterfly wings, I flatten the brush against the skin to use the whole brush. But when I want to create thin lines, I switch to using just the tip of the brush, holding it at a 90-degree angle to the face. The movement always follows the short side of the brush, meaning that the short side of the brush leads the way of the stroke. It doesn't always touch the skin, but it guides the direction of the motion. On the left side, I'm showing a few wing shape options. There are definitely more out there, but these are the ones I use the most. Now, besides focusing on the overall butterfly shape, I'm also paying attention to how each fold or step inside the wings is created. Every time I pull the brush inward, the angle I use changes the shape of the step down. So, it's not only about the outer butterfly shape, it's also about how we build it from the inside. Layer by layer, by shifting the brush angle, I can create different inner shapes and bring more character to the design. I'm using a filbert brush, size 4, loaded with gold paint mixed with a bit of white. I'm applying it to the muzzle area and making it intentionally wider than the natural space between the nose and the mouth. This helps create more animal-like feel by adjusting the proportions of the face, since that area tends to be a bit narrow. I personally love using a filbert brush for this part, but using a sponge is just as valid. It's simply a different technique. Everyone should choose the method that feels most comfortable to them. Sometimes I use a sponge too, just to press the paint in and smooth out any brush strokes. I'm painting small roses inside the butterfly, just the rose buds, the very center of the flower. I like painting flowers in a natural, organic way, which means nothing is too precise. There is one important principle that I repeat. But just like in nature, every petal is different. Every rose has its own shape and size. Perfection isn't the goal. Once you understand the basic structure of the rose, you can create anything. That's why I have a full separate lesson just for roses. If you're curious, I'd love for you to check it out. It's all about building beautiful, expressive roses step by step. Here are a few options for flowers and leaves. The differences between them really comes down to my hand movement and the angle of the brush. The technique itself isn't complicated, and with learning, practice, and repetition, it becomes much easier over time. If it still doesn't quite click, go check out the rose episode. I explain the technique there in much more detail. I'm filling in the empty areas using a filbert brush loaded with gold paint. I love using metallic colors around the eyes because they're soft, lightweight, and don't feel heavy on the eyelids. They also don't emphasize the small creases that form when we squint or move our eyes, which make them perfect for this delicate area. Then I move on to adding some leaves. How many I add really depends on the setting. When I'm painting at events, I usually simplify the design to save time with fewer flowers and fewer leaves and less details. But when I have more time, I love to add extra details and refine the overall look. The key is to make sure that even a faster, simpler version still feels beautiful and impressive, both to the person you paint and to everyone around him. I'm outlining the tiger's muzzle now using an angle brush. I can work from bottom to top or the other way around, whatever feels more comfortable for my hand. What matters most is keeping the line nice and thin. If I use only the tip of the angle brush, I get a thin line with a dark green. But if I hold the brush straight up at 90-degree angle and drag it gently, I get both the dark and the light greens color together. It makes a nice blend effect. It's all about what you like. Then I pull the brush sideways, trying to keep it at a 90-degree angle. It's definitely a bit tricky, but totally doable. That's how I create the inner lines of the tiger's muzzle. I'm shaping the tiger's nose using an angle brush. I usually use a round brush for details like the nose and the whiskers, but this time I decided to continue with the angle brush, which gives it a slightly softer look. Switching brushes during an event slows down the process. So by sticking with the same brush, I'm actually saving time and making the painting more efficient. Using the tip of my brush, I pull thin, delicate lines inward from the outer edges of the butterfly. And oops, there's a small mistake. No big deal, everything can be fixed. No need to panic. If there's time, I can always wipe and redo it. And sometimes it's totally fine to just leave it as is. I pull thin vines in different directions to create movement and add an extra detail that makes the design more dynamic. With a round brush loaded with white paint, I create the tiger's teeth on the sides of the mouth, not directly underneath it. I do this because it looks more natural to the eye, and if the teeth were placed right under the lips, they end up looking like Dracula fangs. And finally, last but not least, I love adding dots in different sizes. They really bring the whole thing to life, and they're perfect for covering my imperfections. I'm outlining the teeth using a thin round brush loaded with green paint. But when I'm working at events, I usually skip this step. It saves time, and the teeth tend to get wiped off anyway. Kids are licking their lips or eating, and honestly, if I don't outline the teeth, it doesn't end up smudging in an ugly way. Do you know what I mean? Never enough dots for me. I can always add some more. I'm handing her the mirror, and wow, she is so happy. You can see it in her eyes. This moment, when they look in the mirror for the first time, is what we call the reveal, of course. Sometimes kids aren't able to fully process the face paint right away because it's such a big change from what they're used to seeing, especially with the larger designs. Their first reaction isn't always a smile. It's more like their brain is trying to make sense of it. And only after a minute or two later, the big smile finally shows up. And that makes my day. So I'm wrapping this up with one sentence I believe every face painter in the world can relate to. Not just a job, but a joy from above. Face painting is all about love.